Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to you. My name is Shama Banerjee, and I'm the Senior Editor at Nimbus 90, and we are delighted that you're joining us this morning for our very first episode in our networking series, In Conversation with Digital Leaders. So this series is all about getting a front row glimpse into the IT strategies of different industry disruptors and how they build their digital advantage, as well as giving you the chance later on to discuss your challenges with experts from Equinix, our sponsor for this series. So there is a Q&A box at the right of your screen. If you have any questions for our speakers during this time, please do put your questions into that box. You can put them in anonymously or with your name, that's up to you, but we encourage you to just put in as many questions as you have and we'll come on to those later in the session. So today we are hearing from Mark Howell. He is the technical expert and IT facilities services manager for EMEA at Ford, and we'll be digging into the transformation journey that he has led there. So Mark is an IT professional with over 30 years of experience. He's worked in many industry sectors, including automotive, outsourcing, banking, stockbroking, pharmaceuticals, oil, local government, and charity. So a lot of experience that he'll be sharing with us this morning. He joined Ford's Accelerated Solutions Center in 2001, and he has managed Ford's European data centers from 2006 to 2011. Today, he is a member of Ford's cross-functional corporate technical specialist group. He's recognized as the IT facilities technical expert, and he's responsible for the planning and engineering of informations and communications technology facilities for EMEA and process improvement globally. So, Mark, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for inviting me, and welcome everyone.
So I'll now hand over to Matt George, who is the Director of Segment Marketing for EMEA at Equinix. He will be chairing the discussion. Matt joined Equinix in 2012 and is one of the company's global subject matter experts. He sits as an overlay between the sales and technical teams, and he advises companies on the ways to improve connectivity, global reach, end user experience, and cloud enablement through deployment on Equinix's global interconnection platform. So Matt, I will hand over to you. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Shama. And yeah, welcome everybody to the first of these conversations. One of the great advantages of working at Equinix is that we work with, such a wide variety of companies across so many sectors using our interconnection platform. And I'm actually delighted that, we have such a global brand to start this conversation. So Mark, personally, thank you for joining this and, being able to share your experience and insight with us. So, digital transformation is certainly not new, but I think in the last 12 months, all of us from a business and a personal point of view have experienced unprecedented disruption in both our personal and business lives. But to start this conversation off, what are some of the sort of key shifts that you've seen in sort of infrastructure and planning over the last 12 months, and have they really been accelerated? Have you sort of adjusted what I would call your transformation roadmap?
Yes, thanks, Matt. Welcome everyone. Yes, we certainly have changed things. I think everyone who used to travel around and go into the office and has seen things change. Many of us are working from home. If you're not don't have a site specific role, but working in a factory, then you can work from home. And immediately that gave us challenges with VPN and access and so on for those people. So there was quite a lot of work that had to go in by those IT teams to just really open up the network so that people could join from home, and all the collaboration tools, the acceleration of those things. But how we do things changed as well. We can't travel, and so we're trying to transform our factories from the conventional factories that we used to run to factories that are really operating with technology. That's happening now, but we can't visit. So if you're trying to build a computer room or a data center, depending on what you call it, but something that hosts 20 cabinets on site, normally we'd be making a number of visits, and you can't do that. COVID stopped us doing that. So how do you do those things remotely? And we've used a lot of collaboration tools. We've tried various ways of communicating. So started off with the obvious things like FaceTime and Skype and so on, so we could do video, and then someone showing us what they're looking at. We tried Microsoft Halo, use that with here in the UK with a ventilator challenge, and where we built ventilators or assembled ventilators very quickly for the government. So we tried many different tools, including WebEx Teams video, to enable us to see what's happening at a remote site and being able to help guide and steer those people locally and our suppliers. So, things change there, but also in our office environments, those offices that we had in the capital cities around the world, suddenly we didn't need all that office space, and we realized that we can run the business with people, not working in the office from working remotely. So a lot of transformation happening in all those offices, downsizing offices, moving from one office to another. So big changes there. Along with all the other changes that we're seeing, with electrification for vehicles and autonomous vehicles, launches of new vehicles. So, for example, the Mach-E, and we've been launching those vehicles, but digitally and online. And the F-150 Lightning, which is the first fully electric big truck, although it was broadcast from world headquarters in Dearborn, Michigan, it was all done online, and everything's done online today. They're not released at motor shows anymore. So huge change.
I think you're on mute.
I was making sure everyone could hear Mark, so I do apologise. So you've given a couple examples there of probably, I think, things that you might not have done if it hadn't been for this, I suppose, this forced situation. But there's two sides to this. There's the technology. I think a lot of companies like yourselves have proved that technology can enable us to work differently, but there's also the people perspective as well. So, what have been the key challenges between balancing, a shift in technology and then getting people to maybe readjust their working practices?
So the biggest challenge for us with the technology is actually obtaining the chips, to build the vehicles, but also, when we buy lots of equipment from all the major suppliers, and they have the challenge as well. So the chip shortages it has a big impact, and lead times for new equipment. So if we're putting together a new site with new equipment, we've got those lead times from telecommunications perspective, from Cisco, getting the equipment. It's impacted our tech refresh program. And then there's also the technologies for those people who are now working from home. How do we get them the equipment to work from home? Our IT site management team and our asset team did a fantastic job in enabling people to come in, collect their equipment and take it home, or if necessary, dispatch that equipment so they could set up equipment at home to work. And it's all that remote support from what we call our tech lounge, the IT guys that provide that support. And the tech lounges in our buildings are loved by our customers, because they can literally walk up as they go to the canteen, for example, or if in a smaller office, they've got the guys there, and they can just go to an office and they'll help them and solve problems and give them some advice and guidance. But doing that remotely was a completely new thing, really. There was a small amount, but now it's changed to that's the major way that they have to work to support people that are working from home. And then, and also, just the tech refresh of equipment. We're rolling over a lot of equipment for all of our users around the world, and they need to get that equipment. And it's not a simple thing. Even when you change your laptop, often you have to change a docking station and things that go with it. So, there's been quite a lot of challenges there, but the team has done a fantastic job, and they've overcome those things. And the patience of people has been fantastic as well. Our customers, people have learned patience. Myself and Matt were just talking about that, you know, from broadcasting from home, for example, how those things have changed, and you know, noises in the background and so on we put up with. So the patience of people has been absolutely fantastic. And you know, we've been able to give them the platforms, make changes to WebEx Teams, and bring those things up to date to enable them to collaborate more. So there's been significant change to the technology, but there's also been significant change from the way people behave. And I see a lot more tolerance as well from people.
Yeah. So picking up on that collaboration part, and you know, Ford, a huge company, so you've got offices, locations, you know, all over the world. Have you noticed? Well, I suppose let me phrase this in two ways. You know, has the IT function within the company become more central or more important? And again, have you seen? You know, sometimes you have areas which maybe work in silos, sort of networks, data centers, clouds. You know, everyone used to have their traditional cost center sort of set up. So have you seen that come together? And how do you sort of see that maybe going forward?
So from the perspective of myself, you know, I collaborate with a number of teams. Our properties department and the companies that work with those, and also our local site teams. So if it's in a factory environment for example, and there's normally two reasons we're working with them. Either we're re-engineering the factory, ready for a new product, and when we start out, we're still building the old product, but there's a lot of work that goes into re-engineering a factory to build a new model or a new completely different vehicle. We also provide those guys with support as well. So if there's problems, we need to work with those. Our properties department manage all the engineering, so the buildings, the equipment in those buildings, and so on, and they have to work obviously with us from the IT side, because we're providing all those telecommunications cabinets and wireless access points and cables for them to plug in all that equipment. Because today, you know, even things that you wouldn't think about being connected to the network are connected to the network. So the robots that are building the vehicles, things like in the production process, we use a lot of compressed air, we use a lot of steam. All those systems are computer controlled today. So they are connected, and we can also see obviously all the IoT coming, right? So there's a lot of work on IoT, and if you look at some of those areas where IoT is used, you take engine manufacture, for example, you can have over 100 cameras all looking at the product to try and make sure that the quality is right, the engineering is right, and they can focus on those things. But all that data is coming back. The alignment of panels as vehicles drive down the line, you know, there's cameras that can check panel alignment, the gaps between the panels, and so on. That's all technology that needs to connect to the network. So we have to make that network work, and we also have to connect that back to our enterprise data centers, which are in Michigan. Vehicle scheduling, so the vehicle coming down the line, what color it's going to be, the type of vehicle, what wheels it's going to have, and all those trim things is all coming from the vehicle scheduling system, and all coming, you know, just in time to the line. So yeah, IT is highly involved in everything we do, and that's just increasing exponentially in the factories. The days of being able to run the factory when it's not connected to the network are long gone, right? So it's a big disruptor for our factories, but it's also in our product development. The engineers that are designing the next generation of propulsion systems and the next generations of vehicles, you know, technology is everywhere, and we have to make all that work.
So digging in a bit deeper to that, I think what you've described there and how we at Equinix view it is very much, you know, you have an IT core, and you have an edge, and the edge can be slightly different for different companies, for different sectors. So, how are you connecting those, and how are you sort of making them efficient? Are you sort of using them? Are they always on, so to speak, or are you moving more towards like that mixture of physical at the core, maybe more virtualized at the edge? Could you explain a little bit more about that for the audience?
So, answer to your first point about always on, no one, probably for 4 or 5 years, asked me about an SLA, an availability, 5 nines, anything like that. They don't ask, right? They just say, it better not go off. If I talk to a factory manager, keep it on, because when it goes off, vehicles or engines or whatever the product is that they're making stop coming off the line. So that's a real issue for us, and everything backs up. So and even in our parts system, where we have to provide parts to dealers and customers, if their vehicle's not working, often they're not earning money. They can't get to work, or their van's off the road. So your local plumber can't turn up at your house and fix your central heating because his transit's not working. So it's important to keep all that system flowing. But it's, how do we connect those things? So we've built 2 brand new enterprise data centers. They're operational. We're closing down our old ones and repurposing some of those one of them into our laboratories for development of new systems, etc. We've changed our model for hosting. So we use colos, like mainly Equinix around the world, not only Equinix, to host our telecommunications network. So we've got core points in, for example, here, London and Frankfurt, where all our sites come in and they're connected to both. So we've got resilient network there, and we use Equinix's network, and we use other networks to make all that come together globally. But then we connect out to our sites, and at our sites we need equipment as well. So we're moving to a hybrid model where we had no hosting in those colos. We've now started to move servers and storage into the colos away from our sites. One of the lessons we've learned over the last year is companies, the big colos, like Equinix, can do a better job of maintenance than we can do. And I mean maintenance of things like power systems, UPSs, cooling systems, etc., because the protocols in the countries and also at our sites make it difficult to get people to site. If you take on the continent, for example, in Europe, it's not unusual for, say, an air conditioning engineer to drive across 2 or 3 borders, perhaps between France, Belgium, Germany, during the day. That couldn't happen anymore. So whereas as key infrastructure, the likes of Equinix have been able to do a good job of maintenance, and maintenance is important to keep things working. So that's something for us. So we're now starting to move equipment that we can into colos, because that will give us more resilience, but it also changes the way that we have to pay for that equipment as well, right? If I build a facility at any of our sites, that's CapEx. And I've spent a lot of time talking to bankers and various people about how could we fund our edge facilities. So I was planning to build 2 modular facilities last year, and one of them would be operational now if it hadn't been for COVID. But we're not going to build that one. And the reason we're not going to build it is we're moving all that equipment into Colo in London. And the reason for that is we didn't want to spend our valuable capital on that site as a company. We really wanted to spend that capital on building products. And so we reevaluated how we do things. As I say, we did look at how we could fund that of a lease model, putting it onto the expense side, so project expense and operating expense. But we really struggled with that. The banks want different information to what they had before to offer a lease, and our global IT partners were not able to work with us and make that happen. So yeah, we really like small colos on our sites, right, dedicated to us, that would work for us. But we can't work out how to fund that in a way that works for the company. So we have to do something else. So it's a hybrid model of equipment on site. We're trying to keep that as much as possible to just telecommunications, and keep servers and storage elsewhere. At our factories, we still need servers and storage, and we will do for the foreseeable future. But we will limit that to what we absolutely have to have at the edge. And possibly, we see this really at the edge, on the line, in the factory. So it's how do we do that? We've been re-engineering our policies and our standards to work with the way that technology is working today. But it's all about money, right? It always has been. Yeah, we have to work with the finance and accounting guys, whether they're internal or external, because we have to balance the books. And so we want to focus our capital on, as I say, products, things that help the customer, not IT, really, if we can help it. So we want to get that all onto expense.
I think that's a fascinating insight into how, because when you look at Ford, it's the history of the company, and we were talking earlier about people who work for Ford. There's generations of people who work for Ford. So to have a company that is so sort of ingrained with history, but also is capable of transitioning, adapting technology, I think is a fantastic story for the audience to hear. And one of the things I wanted to pick up on was this, which I suppose at Equinix we call it this notion of flexible IT. We long believe that you need an ecosystem of partners that you're connecting to. You need to bring in your supply chain, but this shift from capex to opex, I think, is something that a lot of companies are looking at now, because it's not just about buying more physical IT. It's not just then about putting that in a co-location. It's actually about using it as and when you need it. So, going forward, and I think it's when we look at going forward, because we've come through so much disruption, how do you plan your sort of cycles? Or is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Because of the setup you've got, can you adapt much more quickly? Do you feel I suppose, very difficult to sort of say at the moment, but do you feel in a better place to be able to adapt with the learnings that you've gone through?
Yeah, we've been learning. We're always learning, right? But for the last, I would say, since 2015, we've been learning about how do we build new IT facilities or re-engineer existing facilities quickly. And we went down the modular route, and we've constructed modular data centers at our factories, our edge sites. And we've done that in a way that they can be expanded, so that if we needed more space, because things change, so we knew we might have to grow. So we looked at the footprint and how we would be able to make that happen. We also looked at how much power, A and B power. So how do we do that? One of the things that we learned from what we're doing is, today, if I was building a modular facility, and you would see this from Schneider as well, where they call them energy centers, we build 2 separate power rooms. So those power rooms that have the power coming in from the transformer and going through the switch gear and the UPS, etc., to the data hall, which may not be that big. Can only, we have facilities that have got just 15 cabinets, right? So, but those facilities, the power coming to them is coming from 2 separate modules, power modules, which are then connected back to, as I say, the transformers and generators. But we learned to separate those, which means that if we need to upgrade power quickly, we can swap out an energy room over a weekend. We lift it up and move it away, bring a new one in, and that we've upgraded one of those power rooms and reconnect it. And we can do that in that 24/7 always on model we're still running. Okay, we haven't got the resilience of 2 rooms, but we can do that. And the following weekend, you could change another one. So we've worked out how to do that. But building those facilities, it costs, let's say, at macro level, about $3 to $3.5 million to build one of those facilities for 20 cabinets, with 2 power rooms, backup generators, and you may have to do some other things, like in Africa, build a big canopy over the top because of the sun. And then there's all the other work that goes around it in the the project management and construction and so on. So and then moving the equipment from the old facility to the new. So you end up spending somewhere between $4.5 and $5 million. If you multiply those numbers up across all our factories that we want to upgrade, it suddenly becomes really unaffordable. So how do we do that differently? And one of the things we've done is we signed up with Google. So we're going to be putting a lot more with Google, as well as our colos. As I mentioned, we're going to bring stuff into those facilities. And we're really looking at how do we do these things on our sites, and how do we use our money to the best advantage of the company. We try to plan over that next 5 to 10 year horizon, but the reality is we're going through the process at the moment. We're well into it for the money that we want to spend next year on tech refresh and on our facilities, and that includes things like replacing air conditioning units, UPSs, and those sorts of things that have come to end of life. And that's a big cost on its own as they're coming to end of life. And we see that end of life shortening. Then the days of equipment wearing out because the bearings are worn out and so on is going away. What we're now seeing is the firmware is wearing out. So you can't upgrade the firmware or the software. The device now as a risk, and many of your customers out there probably have a big security risk, because you can connect pretty much to anything, and then you're on the network. So those vulnerabilities in M&E are a big issue for any company that has those things connected. And it's not just from the data center side, it's throughout your business, air conditioning units and so on. So yeah, it's trying to find the money for that, but also to move us forward. So we're looking at that very closely. But things come along and hit us. The chip shortage, being able to make vehicles. We've had a lot of factories closed because we've had no. That stops the revenue coming in. That makes us quickly think about what can we not spend this year, and let's think about next year, right? That makes another issue. We haven't got the revenue coming in this year, so we not only can't we spend it this year on projects that we planned, we can't spend it on projects next year. But we need to move the company forward with new products that appeal to our customers to keep their businesses running. And the IT is now also in the vehicle. It's everywhere, right? Our applications that they've got on their mobile phone, they can control their vehicle and manage their fleet. All those things require us to put that infrastructure together, as well as the application suites. So although it's high up the stack at the top, the bit where the customer and our staff are looking through that pane of glass on their smartphone or on their browser, below it is infrastructure that powers that. And a lot of people don't understand that. It still amazes me that people think that when they make a phone call from their mobile, it just literally connects to that next phone. They don't realize it's going through at least one data center and probably many, many more. It amazes me.
Well, one of the things when people say to me, who do you work for? And, because we're not a consumer-facing brand, and I say Equinix, there's usually a puzzled look. Then when I say that 90% of the world's internet traffic touches one of our locations, they then suddenly become a little bit more interested. And they become, just as even more interested when we talk about the customers like Ford and Netflix and Zoom, who we work with as well. So I know we're coming to the end, Mark. I just wanted to say, if anybody has a burning question, you can pop it into the chat and we will see it, or we can take it into some of the sessions afterwards. But my last question, I suppose, because we've got in the audience, we haven't just got people from the automotive industry, we've got people from a cross section of industries. What I suppose if I was to say to you, with sort of partners and vendors that you work with, that Ford would choose to work with, what are the things that you're looking for in the future? Maybe not how you choose them, but how do you expect your vendors and suppliers to approach the world that we're all in, the changing world that we're in?
Well, the first thing is we need vendors that can collaborate with us and do that in a way that's really constructive, and help us move from where we are today to that sort of vision of the future. Not just delivering us a point solution that they know is tried and tested and works today, that they have a mindset of being able to collaborate, being able to sort of set a future vision and come up with ways of making that happen. So, for example, when we send out an RFQ or a technical specification to deliver us a solution, we always give that partner the opportunity to, one, we expect them to reply to the technical specification and deliver us something, but we give them the opportunity to provide a different way of doing things, one or more, and a perspective on doing things differently. And that often helps that conversation about, what we're doing, and can completely change our view of how we're going to do so. So if we're digging a trench, right, for example, coming onto a site to move a wide area network connection, or to bring a wide area network connection on site, I'm not expecting to see lots of alternatives, right? But if we're looking to build a new IT facility at one of our locations, I would expect them to come forward with some new ideas, how we can do things differently or make it more resilient, how to lower the cost and those sorts of things. But when we come to how do we make the technology in our vehicles work, or the way that we, our applications work, again, we're looking for those companies that have got a fresh mindset and can put forward ideas of how to do things differently, because that's what we're trying to do in our business. We're trying to power our vehicles differently. If you get in a Mach-E, for example, like a Tesla, it is completely different. It is like no other vehicle. We haven't just lifted the hood, put bonnet, put batteries in it, right, and some 4 electric motors or 2 electric motors. It is a completely different new experience. So, those things are changing, and that's what we need to do. We have to have a mindset within the company of how do we change things? How do we change things for the better? To make the product better, to make the customer's life easier, so all the things that they want to do are easier. And although we have hundreds of thousands of people, we don't have all the brains in our company. We need people to help us and to guide us and to share those ideas. Inspirational people.
Thank you. I think that's a great point, and I think so many industries can learn from industries outside their sector as well. Mark, thank you for sharing your insights, your experience. I do have one other question, which is a little bit off piste, but what's your score prediction for tonight?
Yeah, that's a challenge, isn't it? My son's football club, one of the trainers he's in IT, funnily enough, works for the local police force, but he's from Denmark, so he's got a completely different view to me, and he's going to the match tonight because they've got tickets. But I'm hoping we win. I'd love to win, by 2 goals, but we'll have to see. Yeah, we get overconfident at times, don't we? We've all been there. I've talked to my son and my daughter, and they just think we're going to win, right? And yeah, you've always got that nagging doubt, haven't you? Particularly if it comes to penalties, right? So, and we saw what happened last night with penalties. So, if we get through, then we're up against Italy. 33 matches unbeaten. They know how to play the long game. Right? It's a bit like many world champions, like Lewis Hamilton. They know how to play the long game. They've learned that, and it all comes to count at the end, doesn't it? It's not just the first.
That's right.
Minutes when you're excited. We'd love a goal in the first 2 minutes.
Good. So we're going for the win. Fantastic. Mark, thank you. I'm going to hand back to Shama. to wrap up.
Thank you.
Matt. Thanks both for that conversation. We do have 10 more minutes for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Mark or Matt, or just kind of post to the group, please do add those into the Q&A. It's on the right side of your screens. It should be quite clear in a little bar. Do add questions into there. We do have a question that's come through earlier on, just around, is anyone else thinking of downsizing offices and provisioning remote working forever? So I don't know, Matt and Mark, if you have thoughts on that.
Well, we're funny enough in the sort of pre-talk when we were backstage, we were discussing that. So I'll give an Equinix answer, and then I can hand over to Mark, because he was telling me some interesting insights. So I think, you know, as I said at the beginning, we talk to a lot of companies, and this is a key subject. From our own point of view, our office space will change. You know, pre-pandemic, we were developing a much more collaborative approach. I think all of our offices were hot desking. We have offices that are standalone, and they're also connected to our data centers as well. But the majority of that was hot desking. The majority of what I would call our corporate offices all have collaborative floors and workspaces. And they're sort of, you know, conforming to the local guidelines in terms of how we return to office. But I think it's more about, we touched on it, it's going to be about the mindset of people. And you know, how people work. We know that technology helps us, as we're all sitting here discussing this morning, but it's, you know, what do you miss? Is it that face-to-face contact, and how will that sort of change the working week? So I think you're going to see models where people may be in the office once or twice a week, but there has to be a sort of a collaborative reason. You don't want to go into the office and just do a load of Zoom calls. So I think that's, you know, that's sort of how Equinix will operate. Mark?
Well, we have those two types of people, what we call site specific, the people who work in a factory that have to be on site to do their job, right? So although things have changed for them, they've worked out how to do that, and most of those changes have been around the COVID protocols. But the people that can work remotely are working remotely. And what our HR team have done, and they've done a fantastic job over the last 15, 16 months, and did before, but you know, they've helped us there, and we've surveyed all the staff right globally, and we've asked them, you know, how would you like to work? Would you want to go back to the office full time? Would you want to stay at home full time, or would you want to do something in between? So sort of options are, you know, 2 days in the office, 3 days at home, or perhaps 1 day a month in the office, right? You know, and so they've looked at that, and you probably won't be surprised that most of those people want a hybrid model, and they're not looking to be in the office all the time. So we were already, as Matt just said about Equinix, changing our offices, and they've been gradually changing to be much more collaborative, but we've accelerated that. When people go back to the buildings, if they've not been there for 15 or 16 months, they're going to see it very different. They're changing quite rapidly. But again, it comes back to affordability. How much can we afford to spend on those buildings when we really want to focus our money on products? So buildings will change. We look at most of the capital cities here in Europe and elsewhere, where we lease space in either we lease the whole building, or we lease you know, parts of a floor or two, or parts of a floor. Those are changing. You know, we're shrinking offices. We're moving from a larger office to a smaller office. All those things are happening right now, and that's because people are not going back to the old way of working. We know that. And things are changing. That gives us a challenge in IT, because the technology is there, right? So we have, if we change offices, even if we shrink an office, as we've done quite a few recently, if you're shrinking the bit where the wide area network connections come into the IT cabinets, and the IT cabinets that are there with the switches for the LAN, etc., and all the wireless access points connecting back to those switches, that all has to move, right? So it gives us a challenge. And then obviously if you're establishing a new office, we need to set all that up. We're waiting on the telcos to put the new WAN connections in before we can deliver the cabinets, and that gives us a challenge again with COVID, sending cabinets across borders and then getting them installed on sites, because we can't send the conventional team there anymore. We did one in Denmark, funnily enough, thinking of football tonight, not long ago, right? Just a few months ago, and the cabinet manufacturer, their van got impounded, so they couldn't go back, right? So they had to leave the van, right, at the site, and it should have been making its way back to the UK. Challenges like that we get, where suddenly people have to leave the country due to COVID and just walk away. We're having to change our deployment model, how we make those things happen. And again, we have to collaborate with people to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Matt, for your responses. We do have a handful of really interesting questions coming through the Q&A, and I'm aware we've got 4 minutes left. So I think if we can maybe get through as many as we can now. We've got a question coming through here from Mark Sims. So Mark, thank you for putting this in. He says, do any of the systems that you described today communicate/integrate with emerging connected car technologies, Mark? What insights do you have to share in what connected vehicle smart transportation means for interconnectivity?
Well, smart vehicles takes us into all sorts of things that people are not thinking about, so I think people do think about those things that they can do, their personal productivity from their vehicle, but certainly quite a lot of the things that are required for autonomous vehicles are not something that the person who's in the vehicle is actually working with. So for example, the vehicle is communicating with vehicles ahead, right? So when there's a vehicle round a corner braking or stopped, you can't see it. You can't see it today. We've all had that experience. You come round a corner and stamp on the brakes, right? The vehicle knows that vehicle in front stopping or stopped, and it's already taken action. Lane changing, for example, the vehicle will change lanes if it needs to, and do that very quickly, as someone was explaining to me recently. He got a little bit surprised, but he didn't hit the vehicle because the vehicle steered it round. Those things happen. They're working with the street furniture. Things. There's going to be a lot more technology by the road. Your vehicle doesn't need to know that the traffic lights the other side of Paris are working, but it needs to know what the next 2 or 3 are doing. So all that technology needs to happen. So there's a vast amount going on to make that infrastructure work. You won't be surprised that individual motor companies don't want to pay for that infrastructure. So it's how does that get funded in the country? We see the struggle with funding charging points in the country. So it's similar for that technology. So there's a lot of things changing. Even insurance, right? If you're not driving, why can't your child go to school in an autonomous vehicle? How does that work? Is that child now the driver, right? The insurance companies and the governments are struggling with those things. How do they make all that work? You don't have to be a competent or even have passed a driving test to be in an autonomous vehicle, really. So all nice challenges.
Well, we have 1 minute left. I would quite like to cover one last question before we close. This is from Mike Oxborough. So Mike, thank you for this. He's asked, you talked about SLAs. Plant management said it can't go down, but problems happen and things will go down. How do you square that circle?
We have to explain things to them as well, how things work. The simplest thing is, if we don't have any electricity, the technology doesn't work, right? It either needs power from the power company, power from an on-site generator, or power in an interim for a UPS, right? So how do we make that happen? And we can talk to them about that, but if you were to just try and make it always on, then every single IT device would have 2 power feeds. You'd be looking at a tier 4 level of infrastructure like we have in some data centers at the edge switch. it's just not affordable, but it needs to get explained. So they have to work collaboratively together. When are they doing their maintenance? When are they turning things off? They will turn the factory off, right? So how do we do that? And it's the same in offices. Transformer testing has to happen, right? So that's the time when we need to work together. And we have an annual schedule. We can see when those transformers are going to be turned off, and we have to take those maintenance actions at the same time. And sometimes synchronize installing equipment or replacing equipment. It's just again about collaborating and working together.
Definitely. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time this morning, and Matt, for you as well. I don't know, Matt, if you have any closing remarks.
I just want to say, this is the first conversation we've had in this style. So I think it's hopefully the audience has found it insightful. I've personally found it, great talking to Mark, hearing, the sort of the depths, and also I think as a customer, you see innovation on the front end of a car, but the detail that goes into that planning, but most importantly, the interconnectivity and how important IT is. So thanks again. And we look forward to sort of welcoming some of the audience back or new members in the series to come over the next weeks. So thank you.
Definitely. Thanks both so much.